gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this joint budget review subcommittee meeting on personnel, public retirement finance, and the subcommittee public protection and tourism and energy. We will begin with my committee. Ask the secretary to call the roll, please.
Okay. Representative Goforth.
Here in the room.
Representative Graham. Representative Koenig. Representative Meredith.
Yes, ma'am.
Representative Pratt.
Here.
Representative Raymond. Representative Tate. Here. Representative Petrie. Representative Reed.
Here.
Chair Dossett.
Present. I will now yield to Chairman Beckler.
Mr. Secretary, will you please call the roll for our committee?
Representative Gentry. Representative Hale. Representative Kulkarni.
Here in my aunt's office.
Thank you. Representative Maddox. Representative Rowland.
Here in my annex office.
Thank you. Representative Petrie. Representative Reed. Here. Representative Weber. Chair Beckler.
Well, once again, I want to say thank you very much for being here. We're going to have some presenters come forward. Before I have them do, and I would like to share the reason behind calling this joint meeting. I've been inundated with fraudulent unemployment claims over the last 2 weeks. I have also spoken to my personal accountant and several other accountants concerning 1099s with which there are discrepancies concerning the amount of unemployment collected and taxes withheld or owed. When individuals have looked at their bank statements to see what was actually received, some are showing a lesser amount of benefits which have been deposited. I have also heard of individuals receiving 1099s for unemployment benefits they never claimed. Yesterday, I had a constituent reach out to me from my home district and shared that while she was out of country in January, when she returned home, she had 2 unemployment checks in the mailbox at her local farm at a box that is never used, an address that is never used. When she checked the mail and found those, she also discovered there had been a checking account opened in her name as well. And the only reason her unemployment checks weren't direct deposited, there was a mistake in the routing numbers within here with the state. I have also had a constituent who filed and received unemployment benefits last spring when it was announced that the eligibility had been expanded. She was notified in November she should not have received those benefits and owed the Commonwealth over $12,000. She had a lien placed upon her and her property, and when she tried to Frankfurt, she could only get a voicemail and was unable to have someone get back with her. When a lien is placed upon an individual in this way, it locks up their life because there's no way to borrow money on an automobile. Everything is locked. So I have a lot of major concerns on that. Before we start, and I have left a list of questions here at the front for the presenters to see, and in case they aren't here and they're doing by Zoom, we will send these questions out. But these are the questions that I would like to make sure that we get an answer for. How is the necessary information to file for unemployment benefits being attained? What is being done to ensure that we prevent these fraudulent claims from being paid? Are individuals who are committing these crimes being pursued? How is the state of Kentucky working to protect its citizens' identity, which I feel is probably going to be one of the most important things that we move forward on, is protecting each of our citizens' identity. How much in a dollar amount has been paid out in fraudulent claims? How many individuals have been asked to repay benefits, and do all of those individuals have liens filed upon them? Are we getting the necessary information out to our accountants on how to handle the discrepancies in these 1099s? Since many of our citizens actually file on their own, they don't use an accountant. How are we getting that information out to them as well? How exactly does the legislation in the latest CARES Act coming from Washington, how is that dealing with where we are seeing unemployment taxes or unemployment payments been made and they are being excused? How will that actually work for our citizens here of the state? And finally, will we notify all who drew unemployment that they may need to file amended returns, or will that carry over to next year? I will now yield to Chairman Beckler, please.
Thank you, Representative Dossett. I echo the comments made by my good friend, Representative Dossett, in his opening statement. My focus today will be on what appears to me to be data breaches. How is the information gleaned for fraudulent claims? How is that problem being fixed? How is it that there are still 67,000 or so unresolved unemployment insurance claims? How, if at all, does this tie into fraudulent claims? What number should people call if they received a 1099 for UI benefits that they did not apply for, or something they received fraudulently? I'm not interested so much hearing once again about how we got into this mess. I understand that the computer system is archaic and that the UI offices were closed. I am, though, interested in what is being done to remedy the situation. We only have limited time today, so let's get going. Representative Dossett.
Thank you, Chairman Beckler. I'll ask our guests to introduce themselves, please. And as was mentioned, I know we are on limited time here today. So please, if you will all introduce yourselves, and then we will do the oath.
I'm Secretary Roberts of the Labor Cabinet.
I am Buddy Hoskinson, the Executive Director for Unemployment Insurance in the Labor Cabinet.
Hi, my name is Bill Meyer. I'm a managing partner of Strothman and Company, a CPA firm here in Kentucky, and I was asked by the Kentucky Society of CPAs to appear here before you.
I'm Jessica Honeken. I'm Executive Director of the Office of Income Tax at the Kentucky Department of Revenue.
Mr. Chairman, if it's okay, I would defer to Executive Director Buddy Hoskinson. He's the expert on UI, for him to respond to your questions and to give you some testimony. Thank you.
Sure. And before we begin, will we all be able to take the oath, please? Oh, I'm sorry.
Is the green light on?
Green light's on, but here we go.
You are on.
Very good. Kentucky State Treasurer Allison Ball, and I also have with me
Leslie Bilby, Chief of Staff to the Office of the State Treasurer.
Thank you all. Thank you all. And will we all raise our hands? We'll take the oath, please. Do you all swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Good.
All right. Mr. Roberts, I think you said you wanted Mr. Hoskinson to begin, so we will start with there.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for giving us the opportunity. Again, my name is Buddy Hoskinson. I'm the Executive Director for Kentucky's Unemployment Insurance. So one of the major reasons, obviously, that you've called is to talk about fraud. And so I want to kind of paint a picture for you quickly in the essence of time. What are we seeing on a national level? That's not just a Kentucky issue. What are we seeing through the social media, and what are the efforts being done from the federal level, and what are we doing on the state level? So prior to the pandemic, fraud for unemployment insurance would have traditionally been, and was very small, regarding claimants, verifying that the claimant is who they are and they are truthful about their application for unemployment insurance benefits. That is not what fraud is today across this country. Fraud today for unemployment insurance is claimant fraud, employer fraud, and identity theft. Those are the top three areas that we see. Going to give you a little bit of the national perspective at this time. Government programs have always been a target for crime, as we know. The pandemic unemployment insurance being stood up so fast across this country was a prime target for all states working to accelerate benefits to jobless Americans. The pandemic unemployment insurance was aimed to help gig workers, caregivers, people who were self-employed, and whom typically would not have received eligible unemployment insurance prior to the pandemic. Many of those items mentioned as standing something up so quickly and a lack of safeguards from the federal level down caused and is causing still some of the fraud. Lack of DOL guidance, NPUA at the beginning, caused the perfect storm for us and for other states that we work with on a daily basis. There are more fraudulent claims than legitimate claims that we are seeing across the U.S. at this time. Record number of fraudulent claims are being carried out, not just in the state of Kentucky, but interstate claims and international criminals. We see that being with crime, gangs across the country and out in the world as well. Fraud is so complex and multi-layered that one of the questions that you asked is, what are totals? We are still working with federal levels and state levels to give you that information and for us to have it for ourselves. But what I can tell you is we know right now $63 billion has been in fraudulent benefits, not in Kentucky, but in this country, as we are trying to work through a national pandemic issue within the pandemic. It is going to probably be and exceed $100 billion before the pandemic is done. Now let me move quickly to the other piece that I want to talk to you about. You want to know how people are gaining information. Dark web is our biggest avenue where we're seeing criminal activity and imposter fraud happening. We know very clearly, and we've seen a country such as Nigeria being very prevalent in crime when it comes to fraud in this country. We know that they work to hack information and gain other systems, not just when you're asking about, are you talking about a Kentucky system, but you're talking about across all systems, whether it's been FFX, Marriott, any of those breaches in the past few years, they have gained that information. They also have playbooks that describe how to beat the systems in the UI system, how to change something very simple in addresses, or what was mentioned at the beginning of this about routing numbers, because they're trying to get a hit. And they're getting a hit about 1 in every 6 times. What are scammers seeking from a U.S. citizen? They're seeking their social security numbers. They're seeking addresses and looking at addresses where they can try to randomly put in a claim. They're seeking random employers and addresses, that employers who've never had that employee or that individual hired by them or worked for them, excuse me. The victim has no idea that this has occurred more times than not. How have they been finding out? They've been getting a statement of monetary determination from unemployment insurance all across the country, as well as Kentucky. Or they're getting a 1099 that, as you said, they didn't apply for. So we are aware of that, in all honesty, but that is how most times systems are finding out what crime has taken place. We know that there are overpayments, as you mentioned, as well as 1099s that we are working to correct. You asked the question about how does someone let you know about a 1099. On our website, if you went to the kcc.ky.gov website, we have information about the 1099s. We have information about how you go in and if you need one corrected to put your information in so that we can get that worked. We also have information from the IRS that came out in mid-January when they recognized that states were having trouble with 1099s on how you could still file your taxes and make that amendment. On the federal level, let me tell you that twice the federal level has issued $100 million to states on to help with fraud. Kentucky has applied for and received the maximum amount of money that was able to our state, which is $1.784 million twice, to help us with upgrading systems and to upgrade and give us more staffing so that we can combat the fraud. Who's helping us? Justice Department has issued 50 state task force to help with us. FBI is helping with us. The state AG's office is helping. Secret Service is working on this. U.S. Department of Labor of Inspector General is working on this. The National Integrity Data Hub is working on this. We are using all of these connections along with, I would like to thank our State Treasurer, Allison Ball, and her staff for helping us for when we moved from a debit card system to a paper system recently due to a bank pulling out of the business. They are truly helping us. And please know how much I appreciate your help and assistance with your staff of how quickly we came together and partnered together to work on our efforts. We are using systems like LexisNexis, and we are using our state partners to look at what are the similarities in what we see as trends. We do know and see how offshore banks, even today, I am keeping things at a high level because I know that people could be watching this and gaining information from what we're doing as a state. So in an effort for Kentucky, we do have analysts who keep a watchful eye on any type of, when you say a data breach, we have two different types that we look at. What is truly a data breach or what is called a security disclosure event, which out of the two, it's basically the method and the scope. So we do keep a watchful eye, as we knew ahead of time of the recent on February 24th of the cyber attack that was being attempted, how we were quickly able to pull down the system and to put all the checks and balances in of what we were getting ahead of the game. We do flag anomalies that you speak about, the repeat bank accounts, the out-of-state banks. We know there are initial set of banks that we consider a cash bank. So if you were to go to Kroger or Walmart and buy a card of a Visa or MasterCard that you wanted to upload, we kind of consider those what they are, cash banks. They run to these banks that really are very hard to trace. We can see and track claims all the way down the line to those particular banks. And I mentioned that without mentioning banks because that is very prevalent and it has been discussed on a national level. So we put in reCAPTCHA. If you've recently had people go in and look at some things that they've had to do, we've updated our LexisNexis. We've updated our BARTS program, which is again, another audit reporting and tracking system. We're uploading and standing up another program called ID.me. When you ask the amount of claims that are still out there, a big vast of those claims are verifying IDs and making sure we have the right individual. And with ID.me, we'll not only be able to upload documents and verify with their help, we will also be able to do video conferencing with the individual if we can't verify. Another secure measure of giving us what we need. And if you've seen national news, you will see ID.me has been stood up in about 14 states at this time. Out-of-state PUA claims, pandemic claims. We are able to track and see those trends. Recently, we were able to stop 240-some thousand PUA claims from out of state and out of the country. We watch our social media posts. We have seen in recent weeks that the fraudulent imposters are also copying websites and are copying over to their blog posts and are copying brands of UI all across this country. The federal government 3 days ago recognized that and is now helping the states work with Facebook, for an example, to help get those fraudsters shut down. We promote and give information not only by our website, but we also give it through our weekly UI briefs that happen from the governor's office. Again, I mentioned that we have on our website about if you feel like you have an incorrect 1099, and I know Jessica will speak to that a little bit on revenue as well. But we also have the same thing with fraudulent. If you go to our kcc.ky.gov website and you go halfway down the page, you will see a tab right in the middle that says fraud. You hit that. It'll get you right to, if you think you have a fraudulent claim, you hit that button and you go right in. Are you a claimant? Is it a claimant fraud, identity theft fraud, or is it an employer fraud? Because what we want to do is we want to get those worked and be able to track that information versus just coming in through all of my staff's emails. We're trying to shrink that funnel so we can gain the information and help, whether it's one of your particular constituents. They're our customers, and we want to make sure that they get the assistance that they need. So I'm going to stop there because I know in essence of time, you want to also hear from revenue.
Yes, go ahead, please.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Everyone see that? Okay, so I've already introduced myself. I've been with the Department of Revenue a little over 14 years now, focused on income tax, so very knowledgeable on it. So thank you, Buddy. He kind of already commented on this issue that the IRS issued some guidance back at the end of January on what to do if a taxpayer believes they've received a incorrect 1099-G that reflected more unemployment income than the individual received, or if the individual didn't actually receive any and was a victim of fraud, what should they do? So the IRS had issued some guidance that's available on their website that states that individual should reach out to the issuing state agency. In this case, it's the Department of Unemployment Insurance, and request a corrected 1099. So we have been receiving several calls, essentially inundated with overflow for unemployment insurance. And we've been directing them back to unemployment insurance when they have a question about a potentially incorrect 1099-G, whether that be fraud or just educating that individual on what is actually included in that taxable income on that 1099-G. So we've been educating individuals as they call into the Department of Revenue on what's included on that 1099-G. And 9 times out of 10, educating them on that amount answers all their questions, and that's the end of that. So if they think they've received an incorrect one, they reach out to the UI. They've been responding them on a first come, first served basis, and generally they're very great about taking care of everything. So Department of Revenue's role in this is we accept, review, and process tax returns. We are the administrators of tax laws. We collect the revenue and provide service and answer questions to the citizens of the Commonwealth. So we are the collectors of the tax. We process the tax returns. And just like Buddy has discussed, we have several checks and balances in place. We also use LexisNexis and have thousands of checks, and when we receive a return, to prevent fraud and to prevent refunds from being issued. I believe we've stopped more than $28 million in fraud last year and $28 million the year before that as well. Year to date, we've prevented about $4.6 million in fraud already on fraudulent refund requests. So I wanted to touch on, I believe one of the questions was the American Rescue Plan Act. And one of the late breaking provisions in that act at the federal level is that it contains a provision that would exempt up to $10,200 in unemployment income from being taxed. At this time, it's very new. It was added on to the plan at the last minute. We are reviewing the exact language in that amendment to the Internal Revenue Code and taking it into review and consideration. And we hope to issue guidance very soon in the next few days as once this, federal plan becomes law. So we publish updates on our website quite frequently, revenue.ky.gov. We have COVID information and bright orange boxes on our landing page. Click on that and we have FAQs. So we plan to issue public guidance via that website very soon. That concludes my information I have to share today.
Thank you very much. Mr. Meyer, would you like to add?
Yes, thanks for having me here today. As I mentioned, I'm managing partner of Strothman and Company. We're a top 5 Kentucky-owned CPA firm. I was also a past president of the Kentucky Society of CPAs, and they asked me to visit with you today to just make a few brief statements and then also to answer any questions that you believe a practicing CPA might be able to answer. Our firm itself has received a number of fraudulent claims. In fact, last week I was quite surprised to find out that I had been laid off because our firm went out of business. So I myself am a victim of one of the fraudulent claims. I've never used a credit reporting service before, but I signed up for one immediately because I was concerned. We've also helped a number of our clients respond to fraudulent claims. The most significant example I have is I have a small auto repair shop that has about 15 full and part-time employees. They've received over 200 fraudulent claims, all against people, or all from people, the names they don't recognize. So I'm glad to hear that the state is trying to get on top of this along with federal resources, but it is going to be an issue that practicing CPAs such as our firm are going to have to deal with probably now for the next, at least the next couple of years. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have for a CPA.
Thank you there, Mr. Meyer, and we'll go to Madam Treasurer.
Thank you very much. I'm glad everyone else has already spoken before me because most of your questions you've asked really are in the realm of the individuals who've already spoken. One thing I can do, and I'll just give you a window a little bit of what the Treasurer's Office does, is that we issue the final payments. So we're the last step in the process, but we don't do the verification and we don't deal with the claimants. UI deals with those individuals, and then they direct to us the information where payment should be sent. So we've never been able to verify, to do background checks, to make sure that we're doing that, finding out if fraud has occurred. But one thing I can help you with, to give you kind of a window of what's gone on, is that we often get phone calls. We're the one that people contact many, many times when fraud has occurred. And just to give you a window into what that's been like, we usually get, I would say, about 50 calls a day. Not all of them are fraud related, but quite a number of them are fraud. So I can attest that it is a widespread problem and it is a serious problem. We actually have to deal with canceled checks from all across the country. It's not just Kentucky related, and you've heard this already, but just to emphasize this, we know that the fraud attempts are occurring because we deal with checks that have come from states and individuals in Ohio, Indiana, Washington, Missouri, Arizona, of course, Kentucky, Tennessee, California, Pennsylvania, New York, Nebraska, Texas, and even today we added another state, and it was Colorado. So my understanding is that a lot of these individuals who are attempting these fraud UI claims are just casting a wide net, and they're just getting some bait, returning some of their efforts in Kentucky. We've actually had 4 employees within the Treasury itself that have had fraudulent claims taken out on them. And I heard a crazy story from a few weeks ago that my husband's old roommate, when he lived in D.C. 20 years ago, contacted him and said that he had gotten a fraudulent, he knew that there was a fraudulent claim made on his behalf, and he lives in Kansas. So it just so happens that we know this individual who lives in Kansas, and he contacted us. So we have, every time we've gotten these fraud attempt information, we've contacted UI. That's been our primary way of assisting, is that we let them know as soon as we can. We do stop checks, but the problem for us is we don't have the actual claim where it originated. and that lies in the realm of UI. So we can't then correct it. They have to correct it. So we let them know about it. Early in the pandemic, when we first began to see these fraud cases were increasing, we facilitated conversations between our bank, the state's bank, J.P. Morgan Chase, and UI. The bank was actually catching some people on their own, and so we made sure that everybody was in communication. They were talking together, and it's my understanding that those conversations have continued, and we facilitated that. And again, we just make sure that we get calls, we get contacted all the time, and they're always sad stories. Often we have people that will get a check and they'll tell us that they know they didn't make a claim out, and there's a middle initial that's wrong in their name. So people have pieces of information, but they don't have all the information, and they'll let us know, and then we contact UI and get them to correct it. The biggest challenge has been, and I'm really pleased to hear about the efforts that UI has taken recently to address these things. The biggest challenge has been is that we have trouble getting a hold of people. We're on the phones for a long time too, just like the people that call us. And then often when we do get a hold of somebody, they'll tell us it'll be several weeks, particularly from the fraud department, because they have such a backlog. So the biggest challenge that we've seen is not just the people trying to get a hold of UI, but even ourselves trying to get a hold on behalf of these people just to get these things addressed. So that's a bit of a window. Like I said, we have a small part to play. It's the last piece of the puzzle. But because the public knows they can get a hold of us, they often do, and they tell us their problem, and then we try to help get it addressed.
If it's possible, do you mind if I give a little extra pieces of information to, I think, some stuff that the treasurer has mentioned that I think is very helpful and insightful?
Sure, go right ahead.
When she recently speaks about the checks, we were one of 13 states that had a debit card system and that the bank who did the debit card system pulled out of. And we were given little to no notice for that being pulled out of. And so we quickly worked with finance. And again, kudos to the folks in finance like Treasury who helped us rapidly pivot because to get a new vendor was going to be a period of months. And we do have a new vendor secured for debit cards. But the unique piece of this is while we had this happen and it was unfortunate that we had to get away from debit cards, it actually has helped us on less mobile banking fraud, because the mobile banking fraud was, what we were seeing is the biggest point. But to the treasurer's, point, that was a very quick pivot point. I mean, very, very quickly. I mean, I can go back and I think it was to her assistant that we talked, I guess, really quickly, December 22nd, about we couldn't live with the terms that was given to us by the bank holding the debit card, as the other states haven't been able to do, and that we were going to have to make this switch. And so that did occur. And so to that point, that has helped us a little bit in a short term on some of the fraud efforts. But we will be going back to the debit card system as we're launching that in May 1 with the new vendor. As we all know, it just takes time to work out all the technical pieces as we go through. The other piece that we recognize is it is difficult to get a hold of a limited of the staff that we have. So that is the reason why we updated and changed that link so that we could push everybody to that link and be able to assign the workloads in the proper order. And so we have been doing that, and we try to move everybody to that link so that we can have equitable workloads for those that are needing it. We also let people know that on the website, that I think it's great to point out, as I'm sure the treasurer's office does as well, is there's a great resource on the AG's page that talks about identity theft and all the things one should do to secure it and watch themselves. And to all of those points, when I mentioned all of those federal folks who are helping us, we very much are working to help prosecute and very much want to see the prosecution of folks, as I think nationwide, that is what everybody is working towards, so that we can start telling that story that you're not going to get by with this. We're going to look at you, we're going to find you, and we're going to go after you for that. And so that's the reason why some of the analytics we can't talk about today, because we're using those efforts to help capture those criminals, hopefully in their tracks, and limit the amount that they're able to get. And much to Mr. Meyer's account, most people and not everybody can afford to do it, but you can go to the AG's website and look at the measures that you can take to help yourself. I know as our names are out there, as we're public officials or public servants, that you're going to be picked up. We've seen it already. And so, yes, check your identity often. And that is the message to the public. We're in a time that's like no other.
Mr. Hoskinson, we've got some questions starting to come across. Begin with Representative Goforth. You have a question?
Yes, I do, for the director. When are we? I appreciate all the efforts that you have made. And my concern is we're now moving that workforce in your department away from actually still processing these 60, 70 plus thousand claims that have yet to receive $1. I have constituents in my district that have lost their cars, their homes, cannot put food on the table. They're standing in food bank lines. I have contacted relentlessly and sent lists relentlessly, emails, everything. I have not heard back on many of those claims. I have not been able to provide any answers for these folks, except I've sent an email as well. When are we going to start focusing on those individuals and get these claims resolved?
We are working those claims every day. And so I understand that. I do get that there is a need, and we understand that need, and we know it desperately for the folks who need it more than anything else. We do work with legislatures on getting constituent claims over and getting those processed. We also know that there are unique situations, and while somebody's claim may look like somebody else's, there are unique differences with that. Does it make it any different or better for the person who's still held up? No, it doesn't. We know the vast majority of these that are still lingering have to do with identity theft. We also know that the vast majority of these are being bottlenecked because of theft. Again, does that make it right? No, it doesn't. We are working 6 to 7 days a week to try to work through these claims and work through the system. And I believe it was mentioned by Jessica, the new law that's just got passed yesterday. We will be spending our weekend programming that law so that there's no gaps for that funding stream for those who, because the Continuation Act ends actually this weekend. While there's a little bit of pay time left over, it doesn't give us much time to get those continuation of those payments going through. We are doing everything we can, and we will continue to look at every avenue we can. I give you that. I came into this position back in August because I know we have good staff that are working hard, and we meet relentlessly on trying to get things resolved and with programmers to make sure things happen. I know you asked at the beginning, don't give the excuse about an old system, and I'm not. I'm telling you, we are working through them and will continue to work through them.
Let's go right ahead.
So what do I tell these constituents that continuously contact me and their children are going hungry, they're losing their vehicles, they're losing their homes, they have nowhere else to go, the eviction moratorium will be lifted, the utility will be lifted, their utilities are being shut off. What do I tell these people? That you're working as hard as you can to get to it, but I've got messages from months ago that say they should be paid in 3 to 5 business days, and they've yet to receive a single dollar. So I just tell them you're working as hard as you can, and you'll get to it.
No, sir, I'm telling you that we're working as hard as we can, and we will continue to work better. What I'm trying to give you at least the understanding to know is having those claims, without having those claims in front of me, I can't speak to the individual. What I can speak to is that we are continually trying to work through the system to get everybody paid. Unemployment insurance offices are doing what they do monthly now in this pandemic is what they were doing in a year. Again, I'm just trying to give you the picture. I'm not trying to keep somebody from not keeping their lights on. I'm not trying to keep somebody from not getting their rent paid. I'm trying to make sure that eligible claimants are getting their payments. And unfortunately, there is just a process with how many we have. We are working the oldest from the newest. We are working the most critical, that when we get that information, we're trying to move those to the point of the front of the line because we see what's going on. I read them too. I get 200 to 300 emails every day. I try to work those through in the workload as equitable as possible. And if I see there's an emergency situation, we try to get those worked and make sure that there's a full summary of the claim and make sure from A to Z that it gets worked out. All I can tell you is that doesn't stop for us today, and it won't stop for us tomorrow. We'll continue to do that work until we can get all eligible claimants paid.
Thank you.
Representative
Thank you,
Meredith.
sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with just a brief comment following up on what my good friend Representative Goforth said. I think, and the House has acted in recent weeks to pass legislation that says that we need to get our actual offices back open to the public so that we can get some of these claims worked in a more equitable and easier manner. Because we all know, I mean, we're in the middle of a pandemic, we understand that, but sometimes just a real brief face-to-face or across the plexiglass wall conversation can fix some of these claims much quicker than back and forth over email. So I think that's something we all need to focus on, is getting that ability for somebody to be able to meet with somebody in person and deal with the issues. Was not what I was intending to say when I took the mic, but like I said, I think that's something that we need to follow up and work on very quickly. My biggest question right now is, I had a constituent last week reach out to me. He is a manager of an automobile dealership there in Bowling Green, and he received 2 what appear to be unemployment checks in the mail at his home address, made out to him. So what I'm trying to figure out is, do you think that is probably a part of that process, that he has had a fraudulent claim filed against him and it wouldn't have been caught based on the debit card system, but now that we're printing paper checks and sending them out because they have his address correct in that claim, I guess, maybe they were getting money prior through the debit card system, but now he's been able to catch that because we're getting paper checks? Because I don't understand the fraud piece of that if they're actually using his address and his name and the checks are coming to him, because, again, it's not benefiting someone else at that point.
That's correct. And if I can go back to your first statement, we are preparing and will open career centers in April. There will be the regional career centers back open in April. Our staff are getting their vaccines now in order for that to occur. And again, we want to make sure that all staff that are assisting individuals are safe, and we're putting all those measures in place. The PPE, the plexiglass you mentioned, all of those elements are happening. And if Secretary Roberts wants to add anything after I finish, he's more than happy to do so. But that is already in the works. When you talk about the checks, you're absolutely right, sir. The checks have halted where they were going into and getting the debit cards. We know that, and I'm not a techie by no means, but this is fraud where somebody goes in and ghosts you or claws you because you've gone in and done some other activity on your computer, and then there's a hacker in the background that you don't know about who's watching your every move. You know, it is very easy for them to come in and appear in most other business settings, and we are business, to as if they are that person, you know, and they're able to go in and do things like change PIN numbers, change banking numbers, and then go back. We as a system are looking at that as the person who did it. So we're then trying to look at different analytics. And so, yes, sir, I do think the checks at the time has helped with that. And I believe when I reached out last week regarding that, I was just asking for some clarification on that. So to your point, yes, I do think the checks have helped because it didn't get the end result that they wanted.
Yes, Representative Meredith.
So I guess knowing that we have such a system of fraud, and I understand the paper checks are probably somewhat of a burden on the Commonwealth, but it makes sense to me that if that's the way that we're catching some of this fraud, that we may not need to move back towards a debit card system. We may be better off to stay with a paper check system to try to keep some of this thing from happening, number one. And number two, this gentleman, I guess, just needs to report this through the web portal that you have mentioned so that we can get that in the proper queue to be fixed. and work
Yes, sir.
out?
100%. Yes, sir. And we are looking at those avenues. When we talk about helping a claimant, we have to think about where individuals are in our state, and what they use as traditional banking is not what we use as traditional banking, or some of us may not use as traditional banking. So that was the intent originally of providing the options for debit cards, direct deposit, and or you could still get a check. So we again want to make sure that everybody that we're trying to serve has the availability to use those funds and at minimum of cost or effort, because we know some folks do not do traditional banking. But I do understand and I do reflect that the recent change has showed us some slowdown in that fraud.
Yes.
And one final comment that I just want to bring to everybody's attention, just because of what I know about the industry. I know one of the other areas that has been really pressed recently, at least in my area, are folks filing false claims against farmers who may not even pay into the unemployment system because they don't have employees normally. I know of a couple of fairly large-scale farmers in my district that have gotten forms from you all at UI trying to verify that someone was employed and go through the process of verifying their claim. And these farmers talk, obviously. They talk on a regular basis, most of them do. And they have seen the same people, who none of them know who these people are, file against maybe 3 farmers right there in our area. And none of the 3 farmers know who these people are filing, but they're just taking a shot in the dark, and they'll pick one farmer out one week, and they'll say, no, they don't work for us. They'll pick another one the next week, and we've never heard of this person, and send the verification letter back to you all to say that. But they're really working to try to file against some of these folks in agriculture recently, as well as what we're seeing. So I just want to bring that to everybody's attention.
And I will say again, that goes back to the treasurer's comment of the wide net that they're casting, and that I will honestly say they do not discriminate of who they go after.
Representative Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hoskins, a couple of things. I appreciate the fact you addressed them, nationwide. I really wish you addressed Kentucky and what's going on here, because that's what we're really here today for, is for Kentucky. But I have a question as an employer. I know that when someone files a claim, UI claim, you all mail us a letter, or we're contacted, and we have almost immediately, we turn around and either say, yes, that's a fair claim, or no, it's a fraudulent claim. So how can this be going on if this process is still working that way? Where's the breakdown in that? Because within 10 days, you should know that it's a fraudulent claim and be doing something about it. But I'm hearing this is continually going on. How's that happening?
Well, Representative Pratt, thank you for representing my district in which I live. I appreciate that. And I thought when I did give some efforts on the Kentucky of all the things that we're doing, there is a process in the claim. And you're right, if there is a protest or if there's not a protest by the employer, not always will we get a response from the employer from that. And so we do have a step process that we have to take. We also are checking behind the scenes at that time who they are, and where they're coming from to see if they are fraudulent. Is the system perfect? It is not. The system is, we're catching different things every day with that. We're catching different programming with the new laws. And one of the things that I think that is good for everybody to understand and hear is this wasn't traditional unemployment insurance. This program that we are running today is not traditional UI insurance. We are making a program fit into a box across this country that is not what it was intended to do. And therefore, we are having to change processes in order to make those things work. And if you go back and look at March, we call them unemployment insurance program letters, or for another good acronym, UPLs. Those UPLs give us different guidance and have been changing guidance along the way. So we try to make that guidance and make sure the guidance is correct and is fitting our programming. The reason why the new law that just got passed tomorrow, we have a short time to program it, but what we've got to make sure is we've got to make sure that the regulations have not changed on that programming. So what I can tell you again is we are constantly looking at and evaluating the guidance that we are given and how the process is to make it work. And for, again, a program that never existed in UI and would not have ever been into a UI system, whether it's Kentucky or Colorado, Tennessee, Indiana.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Weber.
Director Hoskinson, thank you for being here today. I wanted to ask you a question on the technology upgrades that are taking place. Where are we at on the RFP and securing the vendor for the new upgrades? I understand that some money's been appropriated there from the administration, and also in 2018, the General Assembly passed legislation that created the SCUF fund that's supposed to help that. Can you give us an update on where we're at and when we might expect to see the full implementation of the new technology system?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity to answer that. So the RFP has gone out, the RFP has come back, and there is a team of folks, again, who are working along with finance through this process and reviewing it. And again, I will say that process is taking place, but I also want to be mindful because I know there's a protest period in through that. So I don't want to violate anything in that process. But what I can give you is tell you that it is happening. They are working through the vendors that are very workable or where they believe are workable. And then from once we get that finalized, then we go into that contract period, and we'll work with the state to hammer out those contract negotiation pieces. And then so we know from that point in time, it will take at least 18 months to get the product going and get it migrated from the current systems that we have. And so you are right, there are funds set aside to assist with that. And we are making progress, and we are not slowing that process down. But it is not going to be, as we all know and understand how this works, it is going to be about 18 months from the time the contracts are signed before we would see the first outcomes of a new system. And I want that system like everybody else because it will make things a lot easier. When I talk to my colleagues from other states who have modernized, how much easier it has been to go through the pandemic unemployment with a more current system that reads and is understanding what are the needs.
Do you have any estimates on the overall cost when that's done? Where we kind of might land?
No, sir, I don't, and I don't want to give you. I don't want to give a false number to you. I haven't had a recent number given to me, so I apologize that I can't give that to you. But I don't want to just call out a number.
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Thank you, sir.
Representative Beckler.
Thank you. I have a lot of questions. So in the essence of time, I would ask that everybody be as brief as possible in responding. I'll start off with Treasurer Ball. How much has been paid in UI benefits to date?
You know, that is a question I'd have to actually go back and look at for a totally up-to-date number. It may be that UI can give you the full number the way it is today, but I'd have to go back to the office and ask where we're at this point.
Can anybody in the UI office answer that?
Yes, sir. I can tell you that to date, we are little shy of $6 billion being paid out in UI benefits in one of our various programs, sir.
That was a billion with a B, correct?
Yes, sir. Right under $6 billion on UI benefits, pandemic benefits, extended benefits, all of those inclusive programs that we run in touching almost 2 million claimants.
Thank you.
Sir.
Treasurer Ball, again, I believe you mentioned in your testimony that you have held up some checks.
That is correct.
Do you have a rough number as to how many checks and how much money that would be?
You know, it happens periodically, and I don't know that we've kept a running tally of the actual number. I have my chief of staff here, and I also have my director of disbursements and accounting. It's a number that's always changing, and it's something that we have recurring. So I'm not sure we've kept a running tally of it.
Representative Beckler.
Yes, ma'am.
We get somewhere in the range of several hundred a week that we are stopping. They're constantly coming in every day, these checks. So the amount I don't have, the numbers would be several hundred a week.
What is it that alerts you to stop those checks?
We would either be contacted by the agency or by the claimant. Or I should say the citizen, not necessarily the claimant, the person who has received one of those checks. So sometimes they contact us directly and sometimes it's the agency.
Early on in the pandemic, we also had JP Morgan Chase that had caught some people. I think that they were just signals that they had on their end, and that's why we facilitated a conversation between JP Morgan Chase and UI, because JP Morgan Chase was catching things before anybody else was.
Okay. I believe you went through a litany of states that you've had a problem with or problems with it. Add North Carolina to that, okay?
Okay.
There's somebody who has a relative in the state. This individual lives in North Carolina and has received information that she has received money for something that she's never done, never been here. So add North Carolina. Director Hoskinson, how do we compare to other states with regard to fraudulent claims?
So I'm going to tell you, we are running about the same. We were running a little bit slow in time as far as when it hit us. So we didn't see it start upticking until the fall. In most, where other states, the treasurer mentioned Colorado. I will also say Arizona, because I've been working with a claimant in Arizona as well. So we are trending, sir. I am on a call every Thursday afternoon with colleagues of mine from all other states. We are on an integrity hub together, and we work on this together. And
I'm not questioning what you're doing. I'm just trying to trying to get the numbers. Would you say that we are Kentucky ranks high in the number of fraudulent claims, or we're down about 50?
We're in the middle of the pack, sir. I will say we're in the middle of the pack.
Okay. Did I understand correctly that fraudulent claims are the main reason that we're now up to in the 60 some odd thousand UI claims that haven't been resolved yet?
I'm not telling you that it's the main reason. I'm telling you it's one of our reasons, like with identity theft, that the verifications that we have to go through, the bottlenecking of these fraudulent claims are causing the issues for us to validate what we need to be validating as an eligible claimant that should be correctly paid. So we have to spend more time to make sure that determination is accurate.
What is being done to see that people are receiving return phone calls? I know you've talked quite a bit about we've heard quite a bit about going to the website, but as much as most of us here use the internet, I represent an older population, and they're not necessarily crazy about that. They like the phone. They like to hear a voice, as I do, as a matter of fact. So, especially with out-of-state people, they've tried to call. I just got an email today about somebody who was on hold for 7 hours and then hung up on. That was after weeks of getting nothing but a recording. He finally talked to a human, was put on hold for 7 hours, and then it was connection was cleared. What is being done to get people to return calls?
So, sir, I can also happily tell you, and also Secretary Roberts is on as well, if he would like to. In one of the efforts that we're doing now, and I believe that's in front of you all that's coming through, is the reorg. So we are getting ready to stand up a brand new call center, again, opening up about the same time as the career centers. What we're doing is making sure that we are training those folks to be able to help. We're also working on how we can strengthen up our chat box if somebody calls and actually work the easier type of issues that are coming through on an individual. The call center will have 3 different shifts up, running 7 days a week. It will run an early morning to afternoon shift, an afternoon to evening shift, and then also a weekend shift. I'm not going to, what I will tell you is it will be local here, We're not going to disclose the location again because I want those individuals to be able to make the calls and not have people showing up there, because it's about the calls. It's about calling people back or taking the calls. And that's what we're trying to do. And we know now that what is happening right now is they're funneling through various ways, whether they're coming through you, the secretary, the treasury's office. We're trying to get to them. And now what we're trying to do is create an avenue that makes it an easier path, sir.
That's critical, because when I talk about calls not being returned, I'm not talking about calls that I'm not returning. I'm talking about calls that the unemployment office is not getting back to people. Let's see. How long is it taking to get someone a corrected 1099-G?
So we have in the hopper right now, from the last report that I received, around 3,500 individuals who are asking for more clarification on their 1099s. It doesn't mean, it goes back to somewhat what Jessica said, that they may just need to understand that they actually did have that and they're just not reading it. But we have got that into the box, and it is taking about 10 days. We work the oldest to the newest and working those through.
If somebody did in fact get an erroneous 1099 and it finally gets corrected, as the chart we got from Jessica said, what the IRS guidelines are those folks going to be required to make an amended tax return, both federal and state?
So the IRS guidance provides that if you cannot get a corrected 1099-G in a timely manner before you file your tax return, that you should only claim the income that you actually received. So you'll be claiming an amount of income that you received and paying tax on that income actually received.
I read that, but my question is, what happens if ultimately down the road the IRS comes back and says, hey, look, what you reported doesn't match what we have? So my question is, will those folks be required to file an amended return? And if so, is it for both the IRS and the state? And when you provide the amended return, will you inform them what they have to do?
Okay, so they should continue to pursue getting a corrected 1099-G. And once they get that corrected 1099-G, even if it's after they filed their tax return, that should be provided to the IRS and to the state, and they should file amended returns both at the federal level and at the state level if they had claimed the amount of income reported on that incorrect 1099-G. So if they actually paid tax on the income that they actually had never received due to an erroneous 1099-G, they should continue to pursue getting a corrected 1099-G, which would then be sent to the IRS, and then the IRS would update their records with that corrected 1099-G, and they should file amended returns at both levels. And that should be the end of that.
You're more optimistic than I. Getting back to, or sticking with the fraud, I know it's a nationwide problem, but how many data breaches from our UI system have we seen?
So, sir, when I spoke to the Chief Information Security Officer in COT in the past year, in looking at, they do not believe that there has been any breaches from going through and looking. And I mentioned this briefly, that they consider two different levels, and I'm looking at the information to make sure I get it correctly, so I apologize. What they consider a breach and a security disclosure event. The difference is on the methods and the scope. A disclosure event basically means a smaller scale that constrain the sharing of information with parties that were not intended to receive it. The breach reported certainly falls into a more unintentional disclosure. We have had disclosure events where somebody maybe is seeing a summary of somebody else's account, and once that's reported, then it goes back into programming, and we follow those protocols. But again, from the COT, because I did go back and research, even from my time and before my time, what was in the COT's system with that.
So we know what people have self-reported, but we have no idea how many other people might have found the same thing and just ignored it. Is that correct?
No, sir. I would not know if somebody didn't report it.
Okay, so it's possible. So we really don't know how many people, how many data breaches there were. From now on, I'm going to go back to the original set of questions. And,
yes, sir.
I'll start off with what number should people call if they receive a 1099 for UI benefits that they did not apply for or receive? I need a phone number.
Well, I will go back and say again, we are trying to direct them straight to the website so that we can track that.
I keep saying, or I've said, people want to hear a voice. You guys need to give a phone number. You really do. And so I take it that at this point in time, there is no phone number for anybody to call.
There is a phone number, but you have already said that they go into a system of waiting their time in to get a call back. I am trying to get them worked a little bit faster than that. That's the reason why we again set up that direct link for 1099s, because to Jessica's point, last year Kentucky issued out 75,000 1099Gs, only had to make a correction on 139. This year we've sent out between 550,000 and 500, and I think it's like 80,000 1099Gs. So what we're trying to do is figure out what is the best way and the most efficient way to try to get those corrected from when they come from revenue to come back to us. So I apologize that I don't have a direct person who's going to answer a 1099 call, because they're going to also get calls in about their claims. I am just trying to figure out the best way to get the most efficiency for that individual.
And how long do you think that'll take?
For the website, sir?
No, you said you're trying to come up with the most efficient way, and I'm saying, and how long will that take?
Sir, I believe we are trying every day to come up with efficient ways, and the call center is another one of those ways that we'll be working with to have that. The career centers will be another way for people to get direct contact starting in mid-April. So all of those efforts are ways that we're trying to reach out during this time frame in order to assist claimants from what is different than today, sir.
Are individuals who are perpetrating these crimes being pursued? You mentioned that earlier on that you are pursuing them. How many prosecutions have been initiated to date?
We have multiple subpoenas and working with multiple parties on that. As far as the prosecution goes, the AG's office is working on that, as well as the FBI, as well as the U.S. Attorney General's office. We're all working together and trying to collectively come together with prosecution. And so those efforts are ongoing, sir.
But you can't tell me how many have been how many prosecutions have been started?
No, sir, because we're in the stages now of where they're gathering all the evidence on many of these people. And so they're in process working with the state law enforcement, as well as the Attorney General's office, as well as the others that I mentioned earlier.
Do you know, I don't know who this question goes to, but how many individuals have been asked to repay benefits?
So overpayments happen in various ways, sir. So depending on the program to where it's at. So I can gather that information per program. Overpayments in unemployment insurance is not new. If it was seen, it is increased more because of the pandemic. If someone was found not to be eligible, and again, it's about the eligibility and or were they not in the right program, and we have an obligation under the federal law to go back and get that money back. If it is an office error, then there's a different recoupment. It goes off of future benefits at 25%. If it is something that the individual has done, then they have to make payment back. Now, again, with that, there are appealable processes with every overpayment and every decision. There are 3 levels of appeals that are allowed to take place for an individual. So if they get the determination and they have an appeal and they don't think that is accurate, then they file that appeal. It goes to a lower level. The lower hearing officer gathers the information and then reviews it and makes the determination. If the claimant comes out favorable, then that is good. If the claimant still has an overpayment, they have the right to go to the commission that is set up in Kentucky, to the UI commission. Once that goes through the commission, they have, both the claimant and the state has rights and responsibilities that they have to follow, that they've all acknowledged along this process. So once it goes to the commission, again, if it's a favorable opinion, then that's good for the claimant. If it is determined that the claimant still has an overpayment, then there is the last, which would be going into the court system. So they do have the right to appeal. I am happy to go back and get you per program how many overpayments we have today, and work to get you that number, sir.
Please do. If you'd send it to both of our staffs. Is staffs a word? Staffs. That
will do, sir.
We'll get it out to all members of the committee.
Thank you, sir.
Are we getting information out to accountants and individuals proactively about how to handle 1099 discrepancies? Or are we waiting for everybody to contact us?
To date, we haven't issued any guidance beyond what the IRS had already released. We plan on publishing something on the Department of Revenue's website, just that kind of points to the IRS's guidance, since it is exactly on point and does tell the taxpayer and tax practitioners exactly what they need to do. But we can certainly reach out to the, I see Mr. Meyer here, the KYCPAs, and elaborate and let them know specifically what they need to do in that situation.
I would like to see that happen. In addition, when you put it up, if you could send out to, whether it's a press release or probably an opinion, to the various newspapers in the state, letting them know what you're doing and what they need to do. That way you've covered both the online and people who don't go online. Okay, would you do that for me?
I'll look into it for sure, and we'll do the best we can.
And sir, we will also tell you that it is on our UI website, and we have alerted in our press releases as far as the media updates. We have done that, and happy to continue to put that as a stress point.
With all these fraudulent claims, and I understand it's a nationwide problem, and I heard, talk about the dark web. What is the state of Kentucky doing to protect citizens' identity over and above anything else that we've seen in the past? Anything?
Well, we do analyze data every day to protect the claimants that are in the system. And I believe Revenue also mentioned what they do as well. We are working constantly because, as well as we think we are today with criminals, they are already working to outpace us tomorrow. I mean, that's the nature of their game. That's what they do, and that's how they work to have their funds. So we are constantly analyzing data that gives us just what we were talking about, the information about accounts, particular banks, addresses being used, the various ways that we can pull that information and crisscross it and mix and match it up is what we do. We work with Revenue on that effort as well. And both Revenue and Kentucky Unemployment Insurance uses a product called LexisNexis. We use a product called BARTS. We're standing up ID.me. All of those things are in efforts to try to, as we are all trying to figure out how do we stay in front of, or to be honest with you, at least stay beside of, because of the way the fraud is moving. I mentioned at the beginning, and I'll mention it again, fraud in unemployment insurance is not the same that it was prior to the pandemic, and it will never be that way again, because now there is a new market of what they're doing. Our go, and the federal government's go, is to constantly give us the resources in order to beef up what we are doing on a daily basis. So what we're doing today is not what we will be doing probably a month from today.
Thank you. Any other questions or any questions from committee members? All right. Last comments. Secretary Roberts, do you have any last comments?
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't. I again appreciate the opportunity. We all realize that we need to do everything we can to address these unpaid claims. We're going to do everything we can to try to reopen our career centers by the middle of next month, as Executive Director Hoskinson shared. I do want to point out of all the benefits that were paid out over this past during the pandemic, about 1.6 billion is actually UI funds. The remainder of those dollars are all federal dollars, all the various programs that the Congress has adopted. But I will assure you that we'll continue doing our best to try to resolve these claims as quickly as we can, try to address the 1099 issues. I mean, it just seems like every day there's a new problem that comes our way, but we keep trying to work with all of our partners. Again, I appreciate all the assistance from the Treasurer's Office on some of the issues. And again, appreciate the legislature and considering some of the legislation that we know that we need to try to address the overpayments. I want to remind you, Senate Bill 7 provided us with the language that allows for a waiver of those overpayments. Prior to Congress acting here in the early part of the year, we would not be able to even waive overpayments. So there is a provision now that is in place. The state has adopted by virtue of Senate Bill 7 language that allow us to be able to address that and notify claimants of their rights to have a waiver considered. Again, thank you for your time.
Director Hoskinson, final comments at all? Or you've talked quite a bit. You probably, and that wasn't meant negatively either. I realized after I said it, it came out sounding not well. And I apologize. That wasn't the intent. I was just.
And I didn't take it that way. Trust me. I didn't take it that way. I very much appreciate, as we all do, the opportunity to come and have the discussions, because it's by our work and our virtue of what we do every day. Again, I will tell you that if I didn't have staff that were passionate about their work, I knew that when I came back. I held this position once before, and I said yes to this, and I'm happy to do it. We work long and hard hours, and we'll continue to do that for you all. And please just continue to give us the opportunity to have those discussions with you.
You'll have plenty of opportunity, I'm sure. Director Honeken, any last comments?
No, sir. I do appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you all, and feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions.
Thank you. Treasurer Ball?
Mr. Chairman, I do appreciate your emphasis on needing a phone number, because that's the thing that I see just on a daily basis. We have people who call us, like I've already said, all the time, just trying to get a hold of people. So sometimes we know the fraud has occurred. It's just helping them to get a hold of the correct person who can address it from that end. And just a real quick example, a couple of weeks ago, we had a scary situation in my office where we had a man who actually got into the building by false pretenses, and he refused to leave for several hours. And the reason was because he was trying to get a hold of UI. And we told him, we aren't UI, we're the Treasury. And it's almost like going to Kmart when you're trying to get a hold of Walmart. And he said he understood that. He just couldn't get anyone to help him, and he was desperate. So he actually stayed in our office. Like I said, he refused to leave. And he stayed in the lobby for several hours. And during that time, we called UI repeatedly to try and get him to be connected to them. And it took the better part of the day before we actually got a hold of somebody who could address his situation. So that's just an example, I think, of what you've already identified, is how you do have these people all across the Commonwealth of Kentucky who want to speak to someone. They're concerned, they're worried, they're stressed out, and they need to speak to someone.
Thank you. Mr. Meyer?
The one thing additional I wanted to mention is that we and a lot of my colleagues have had a lot of trouble in dealing with the IRS over these past few months. And so I'm concerned about amended 1099s getting processed right and so forth. So I think the Kentucky Society and the CPAs in the state would really appreciate the opportunity to work with Revenue to come up with some kind of common guidance on how to best deal with this issue.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank everybody for presenting. I will share with you, though, that I'm frustrated that so many answers were nebulous, and we didn't get the firm answers that I think the Commonwealth needs, I think the legislature needs, and I really hope that we can get this resolved. That being said, this meeting is adjourned.